Ripple, I think, could be described as you've got a blockchain service for banks, and you also own a whole bunch of the stuff called XRP. Can you break it down a little bit about how that works?
I think that's a good starting summary. Yeah, at its core, I usually describe Ripple as an enterprise software company selling solutions to financial institutions, banks, payment providers. Part of that technology is a blockchain-based solution. We use a digital asset called XRP to facilitate liquidity. We have a series of products we sell into that market, and we've been fortunate. I think we've focused very clearly on one vertical, payments, and particularly cross-border payments. I think from that focus, we have been able to generate a lot of traction. We have over 100 banks that we're working with around the world, and we're excited about how it's going.
And what about the XRP? Because you've often said it's integral to the plan. Banks are going to use it. Western Union's going to use it. And yet, there's been some reports that this stuff it's the third most valuable cryptocurrency out there, but is there really a real-world use for it?
So one of the things I will start by saying, I think it's really important to understand the distinction between what Ripple is as a company and XRP is as an open source decentralized technology. And I think a lot of people conflate those. In fact, people have accused us of intentionally conflating them, and then we'll call them and say, no, please correct your story to separate. They're like, no, people don't understand the difference. Like, no, let's be clear. Ripple is different than XRP. We use XRP we build tech solutions on top of it. The primary product that we use today is called XRapid. And the way banks work today, if you're the bank of Jeff and I'm the bank of Brad, if we have a bilateral relationship and I've pre-funded dollars and I have, let's say, pesos, then we can settle using a product we have called XCurrent, and that's fiat to fiat. If we don't have that relationship, either I have to spend months to set that up, and then I have the capital costs of having dormant capital parked there. I've got the compliance costs of monitoring, is the bank of Jeff a legitimate, ongoing, trusted bank? Certainly it is.
Always.
Or you can fund real-time liquidity. And what that looks like, and we've talked a lot about our results from XRapid. We've tried to be very transparent about its early days. We certainly acknowledge that we're on kind of mile 1 of a 26-mile race. But we also think we're really the only people that have passed the starting line. Like, we have real production use of our products, and we're seeing real savings from the customers that have used XRapid.
Let's drill down on it a bit. Who exactly is going to use it? So it seems big banks, like a bank, Chase wants to deal with a bank in London to move pounds and dollars around. No need for XRapid. You're talking about the more sort of far-flung places where they might not have a correspondent bank or they don't hold the local currency, so they're going to use this stuff instead?
Yeah.
So give me a specific example of who's going to use it.
So one of the things we've always said is I don't think banks will be the first customers. We've talked about payment providers, and so we have run pilots out there with the MoneyGrams, Western Unions, Mercury FX, Qualix, a couple of others, and those are payment providers that have massive treasury operations. Using one random example, you have a payment provider that has hundreds of millions of dollars of negative working capital because they've taken their dollars or their pesos and they've pre-funded and they've pre-funded the account, so they go into Mexico. Once a week, let's say, they'll wire $10 million to Mexico and then debit along the way. Now, sometimes they overfund, sometimes they underfund. The ability to have real-time liquidity is transformational. The global pre-funded, what are called Nostra-Vostra relationships, it represents something on the order of magnitude $10 trillion. If we can make that more efficient and more useful, we can actually accelerate the engine of commerce kind of on a global basis. Ripple, from its earliest days, has talked about how do we enable an internet of value, and really enabling payments to work move the way information moves today. And I think that's pretty dramatic. So drilling in, we've seen pilots with, I think, 6 different payment providers. I have publicly said we expect this year for at least one bank to use XRP in their payment flows, to use XRapid.
Are you sticking to that this year?
100%.
Okay.
And the reason is, just to boil that down a little bit, it's faster, it's cheaper, and so a little bit like, why wouldn't someone use it? And to your point, I don't think JP Morgan Chase, they're one of the largest liquidity providers on the planet. Citibank's one of the largest liquidity providers on the planet. So do I think, for a dollar yen, dollar euro, no. But, look, if you go talk to a lot of banks around the world, they're paying Citibank for liquidity. They're paying JPM for liquidity. And if they can then use a product like XRapid to fund real-time liquidity into, let's say, the Philippines, into Brazil, that's a big shift for them in a very positive way.
So you're talking about a bridge currency that maybe local market makers will use. Okay, maybe we buy that. Here's the other thing, though. The price of XRP this year has ranged from 50 cents to $4. Isn't the whole purpose of a bridge currency you need something stable? How do you account for the volatility?
Yeah, that is, I think, well, I'll start by saying there's a lot of misinformation in the market. And I think, as I'm sure we'll talk about as we're up here, I think in some ways you have these kind of holy wars playing out. One of them is this idea that, hey, these things will never solve payments problems at scale because of the volatility. Let's think about that for a minute. So I can enable an XRP transaction in 3 seconds, and so I have to take the volatility risk of XRP for 3 seconds. Or I can use fiat and use a wire transfer, and I'll say through SWIFT, and that usually is about 3 days. 3 days is 270,000 seconds. So it's almost 100,000 seconds, sorry, 100,000 times longer than an XRP transaction. The way you calculate volatility is volatility times time. So if you reduce the time by a dramatic amount, even if the volatility is a lot higher, you actually have less volatility risk through an XRP transaction than you do a fiat transaction with SWIFT. Now, the other thing I'll point out is, people will say, well, couldn't XRapid use Bitcoin? And the answer actually is it could. And we've even thought about, architecting the product. There may be circumstances where we would use that because of liquidity. But a Bitcoin transaction today, on average, takes about 45 minutes in, 45 minutes out. So you're talking about an hour and a half of volatility risk as opposed to 3 seconds. So we think XRP is very uniquely positioned to solve that cross-border payments problem.
Yeah, you make the theoretical case well. However, the CEO of Western Union told one of my Fortune colleagues last week that they've dabbled in this stuff, and they're not sure. They take it or leave it. No advantage. Do you have a rebuttal to that?
Yeah, I think it's, well, my first thought is Western Union has been around 100 years. And so the way I think about this is they've been around 100 years. They have spent 100 years optimizing their treasury operations. In 6 months, we launched a product and made it as efficient as what they have optimized for 100 years. So on one hand, I would say, yeah, Western Union has spent a lot of money to optimize their treasury. I think if on V1, actually kind of V.9, because they were using a beta pilot on this, for us to match what they have optimized and they spend a lot of money on is a pretty good start. Now, the second thing I would say is, to some degree, it depends how you calculate these things. Western Union is still, they have negative working capital. They're still pre-funding and holding that dormant capital. So when they talk about that comparison, they're talking about FX. And I look at it and say, well, wait a minute, there's a cost of capital you have to include there as well. And so, and I think Western Union, the CEO said, look, we don't see a cost savings, there's a lot of speed savings. And that still is an improvement. And I think over time, you're going to see if it's a better product at a better price. I'm excited about the future.
Okay, so wait and see. Let's turn to XRP. You make the distinction between Ripple and XRP, but the reality is Ripple owns a big mass of it. They own, I think, more than 50% of it. And they're releasing some in escrow every month. What's going on with that? Are you, the sales, are you changing your strategy there at all? Or?
No, we've been very transparent. We are, as you described, we are an owner of a lot of XRP, and in some ways not dissimilar than the early, crowd sale of the Ethereum token. 70% of the tokens were held by the founders. Ripple, the company, was granted a whole bunch of XRP tokens. We sell some. We use some as incentives in the marketplace to get customers engaged and even market makers to make very tight spreads. There's a flywheel and network effects, and once you get that moving, there's some significant efficiencies that can be driven.
You brought up Ethereum, and I think the crypto world last week took a lot of notice of a speech by a senior SEC official who basically said Ethereum and Bitcoin are not securities. He focused a lot on decentralization. That's apparently the key thing, that no one's controlling it, no central actor, no third party. Now I want to read you, he didn't bring up Ripple, but I want to read you something. This is what he said. There will continue to be systems that rely on central actors whose efforts are a key to the success of the enterprise. Doesn't that sound a lot like Ripple and XRP?
I think it sounds a lot like the ICO market. I think these ICOs are issuing tokens. They haven't even released any code. There's no working code, and there's no open source community developing that code. And so they're releasing tokens, and those are effectively what I think the SEC is saying. They've really said for a year now, they're just getting a little more aggressive about it. They're saying these are securities. I think it's really clear that XRP is not a security. And I'll give you 3 key arguments here. One is, if Ripple, the company, shut down tomorrow, the XRP ledger would continue to operate. It's open source, decentralized technology that exists independent of Ripple. The second is, if you buy XRP, like the people buying XRP, they don't think they're buying shares of Ripple. Like there's a company called Ripple. We are a private company. We have investors. People have bought shares of Ripple, the company. But buying XRP doesn't give you ownership of Ripple. It doesn't give you access to dividends or profits that may come from Ripple.
But doesn't your treasury management, because Ripple does have this hoard of XRP, won't that sort of inform the success of XRP in the long run?
No, I don't think that our ownership of XRP gives us control. I mean, it is an open source, decentralized technology. Just because we own a lot of an asset, it's a little, Saudi Arabia owns a lot of oil. That doesn't give them control of oil. So I think there's a whole lot of examples where XRP behaves and acts a lot more like a currency, like a commodity. The third point, if the first one is it exists independently, the second one is it's the ownership point, and the third one really back to utility. XRP is solving a problem. Securities don't, there's no utility in a security. So, look, I think the SEC, I look forward to them clarifying some of these things. I thought them announcing that Ether was not a security was actually a positive thing for the industry, for sure. And I look forward to their further decision making.
Yeah, and yet though the exchanges have still been skittish about it. There's the mainstream exchanges like Coinbase are adding new currencies slowly, but we're still waiting for them to add XRP. Do you think we'll get a green light from the SEC this year that kind of gives them the cover or the safety to go and add?
Well, I can't speak for what Coinbase decides to or decides not to do. I think 2 days before the Hinman speech, Coinbase announced they're going to list Ethereum Classic. So I think they're moving forward with those things. I mean, ultimately, I think all of the exchanges around the world are making decisions that are best for them. There's economic interest in that if there is both institutional trading and fund flows as we solve problems from dollar to, Coinbase is largely dollar denominated. As we solve problems at scale for institutions, I think it's in Coinbase's interest to, participate in that. But ultimately, look, Coinbase will decide what they want to decide. XRP is listed and has liquidity at, I think, around 75 exchanges around the world. That has expanded a lot as we have brought volume and as we have brought, these institutional flows. We are not, and to be very clear, we are not focused, I've said this a bunch, the consumer speculator is not our target market. Our target market are financial institutions that we can solve a big problem measured in the trillions of dollars using these technologies.
I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. You said XRapid and XRP are going to be used by banks by the end of the year. How long until we see XRP listed by a major U.S. exchange? End of year? Next year?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll go back to, those are their own decisions. I'll digress on that point. I do think, I've been out in Silicon Valley for about 20 plus years. And one of the things I've loved about Silicon Valley is you have a lot of people collaborating and building new platforms, new technologies, and all boats rise. The crypto markets have been different. And I say this, for me, it has been different because I think you have these ideologies where pragmatism isn't ruling the day sometimes. And I think it's because the nature is that people own economic value. And so I described earlier, I think you have these holy wars. I mean, you hear people spreading stuff that is absolutely not true and sometimes known to not be true, but yet they're spreading it because it's in their economic interest.
Yeah.
So ideology, and even the US exchanges, I think sometimes, why? It's interesting. I think sometimes driven more by ideology than
I want to ask you about that. What's up with the haters? Because if you've seen the Twitter feeds out there, you'll see some
I've never noticed.
Stuff. Yeah.
What are you talking about?
No idea. No, but honestly, I was actually asking someone else about this, and they posited that it's because you guys are kind of a hybrid. You're sort of a corporate blockchain thing, but you're also a currency, so you don't have your own tribe, and so that kind of puts you in the crosshairs of everyone. What's your theory? What's up with the hate?
Well, look, I think the crypto markets and the origins of this industry are born of a group of people who, frankly, were very much on the far edges of libertarianism of we don't trust the government and we want to avoid the government, we want to circumvent the government, and even some would say let's take down the government. You know, one step closer, they would say the banks are the man, we hate the man, let's bring down the man. You know, Ripple took at the time, and maybe even today still, a contrarian view. The revolution of blockchain is not happening from outside the system. The government is not going away. And if governments don't go away, all of the regulatory frameworks that apply to financial institutions are not going away. And that means banks are not going away. And so our attitude is, look, if you want to enable an internet of value, you have to connect the repositories of value. The Bitcoin blockchain is a repository of value order of magnitude $120 billion. The repository of value of the banks is many, 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 many trillions. So if you really want to impact society, if you really want to change the nature of how our global economic infrastructure works, of course you want to partner with the banks. Of course you want to partner with financial institutions. But to your earlier point, I think that has made us unpopular with some that, you know, they pray at the altar of certain cryptos, and they have an ideology and religion about it. I do think, I use holy wars. It's a crusade for some.
Yeah, so you don't think Bitcoin is going to get rid of the Fed anytime soon?
I don't think Bitcoin's going to get rid of the Fed anytime soon. But although, can I interject also, because I do pay attention sometimes to what the community says. You know, last week I was quoted as saying, Brad Garland is out bashing Bitcoin. Let me be very clear. I own Bitcoin.
Hang on. The quote was about China. You said there's kind of
I was going to get there.
4 pools in China control a lot of Bitcoin.
3 now.
Okay, 3. Yeah. So break that down a bit.
Well, I'll finish my one quick thought here. I own Bitcoin. I'm long Bitcoin. I am bullish on Bitcoin. But we should acknowledge and not spread misinformation. When we talk about something being centralized or decentralized, control is a key element. There are 3 miners in China. By the way, you can go to lots of websites to verify what I'm saying. There are 3 miners in China that control more than 51% of the hash rate of the Bitcoin blockchain. That means that an authoritarian state could choose, or first of all, those 3 miners could collude. I don't think that's going to happen. It's never happened. But an authoritarian state, the Chinese government does have something called the Great Firewall of China. We have seen examples where governments at more authoritarian states have intervened. It is, and by the way, if you control more than 51% of the hash rate, you can freeze transactions. You can do all kinds of stuff. What happens if, you know, the next election, you know, $100 million of Bitcoins given to Bernie Sanders and the Chinese government says, no, not so much?
Yeah, I think it's real worried. Do you think this actually should be a national security concern for the U.S. Treasury or the trade representative?
I think the government should pay attention and be knowledgeable. And back to the ideology and the religion, there's so much misinformation out there. And you know, people just kind of say, and it's even interesting, you know, early on the SEC is like, well, Bitcoin clearly isn't a security because it's so decentralized. Well, how decentralized is it? You know, if 3 miners can control the Bitcoin blockchain, that's just an interesting observation.
Form of centralization.
Yes.
Interesting, provocative.
But I am long Bitcoin, to be clear. I'm not bashing Bitcoin.
How much Bitcoin do you own?
Yes, you know, how much cash do you have in the bank?
Fair enough. Good response. All right, we're running out of time here. I'm a journalist. What do you think? Okay, real quick, Brad. We're supposed to play this game, overrated, underrated.
All right.
Got 3 ones for you. The SEC.
Underrated.
Okay.
I think the SEC, I mean, look, Ripple has been working with regulators around the world for a long time, and I want the SEC to be clear. I want the SEC to be assertive. I think once we go out to the ICO market, I mean, you and I probably talked last summer. I was, I think, very early in the community to say, look, I think a lot of these ICOs are fraud. It turns out a lot of these ICOs are fraud, and I think agencies like the SEC should absolutely be getting involved. And so I say that they're underrated. I think they have a role to play here.
Second one, overrated, underrated. EOS.
You know, my honest answer, I don't know. I just don't know. I'm sure many of you are aware, you know, a $4 billion ICO, like, wow.
Okay, final one. The Ethereum developer community called Consensus in Brooklyn. Overrated or underrated?
Well, some of you were, Joe Lubin was out here yesterday and said Ripple's way overrated. So I guess, look, back to the Holy Wars, I want them to be successful. I don't compete with them. Like they're working on, I mean, they have experiments, and I mean experiments going on in lots of verticals.
Are they overrated?
No, I'm excited for them. They're underrated.
Okay, very diplomatic. Okay, looks like we're out of time.
Well, I mean
Thank
that.
you, everyone. Thank you, Brad.
If you go by that, I'm not selling my XRP.